Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. You're watching TechStrong TV. Today's Monday, June 8th. Hope you had a great weekend. You know, we're getting into the second week of June. It's summer in many places. The weather's getting nicer. Hopefully things are opening up safely. You're practicing your social distancing and out and about a little bit, and things are calming down. We had a bit of a TechStrongcon hangover this week and weekend. I mean, last Thursday, we put on 12 hours with 50 speakers, 30 sponsor booths, 100 hours of video, and it was pretty amazing. We are going to be showing many of the speaker sessions over the coming weeks here on TechStrong TV. So if you didn't get to go to the event, you'll be able to see some of the speakers here, or at least, see some of the sessions here. But more than that, you could still go to the physical or the virtual site itself, along with all the speaker sessions, downloads from the booths. Just about everything except the live Q&A is still up on the site at TechStrongcon.com. And if you go there, you can go in and listen to sessions at your own, at your own desire, at your own time. So go check that out. Also, as I had announced last week, this week we're going to move to a new schedule with TechStrong TV. Now that TechStrongCon is over, we're going to be doing TechStrong TV 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. We may replay best ofs on Wednesday and Fridays, but new content will appear Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. With the TechStrongCon session content and everybody, there's a full boat of between Charlene Mitchell and myself, Mike Vizard, Jane Grohl, John Willis. We will still have a lot of interviews, and the shows may wind up, in fact, being a little longer on those 3 days a week. But I'm hoping it'll be easier on the production team. So let's kick this week off in high gear and high fashion with some great content today. I wanted to kick it off with an interview I did with my friend Sheng Liang, who's the CEO of Rancher. I know Sheng many years prior to Rancher even, and they just released or upgraded their Longhorn open source storage for Kubernetes program, which is actually a project under CNCF right now. And Sheng's going to tell us all about that. Then I had a chance to catch up with a woman I met last year in Singapore. Her name is Magda Celli, actually Dr. Magda Celli. She's the CEO founder of Responsible Cyber. And Magda's just a really pretty incredible woman. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about her experience as a female CEO and cyber expert who has spent the last more than several years in the Asia-Pac region, helping to meet cyber challenges. And she's going to talk a little bit about what her most recent challenges are out in the Singapore area with COVID and everything else, how they're doing. So it's good to get a look into how, the rest of the world is coping and succeeding and overcoming with this. Then I have a really great interview I want to share with you. It's a gentleman I just had the pleasure of meeting on this interview. His name's Kyle York. Kyle was with Dyn, which of course had gotten bought by Oracle a while back. And Kyle rode it out there with Oracle for 3 years, in addition, to having spent time in Dyn. But he's now launched something called York IE. And York IE, it's kind of, I would call it a new breed of investment partner. More than just money, they really offer a lot of services for an entrepreneur, for an angel investor, for a small startup. And they're now starting to roll out a lot of these services on a SaaS-based platform, help with marketing, sales, other kinds of things. Kyle's a pretty dynamic guy though, right? I think he has a really good view of sort of what a next-gen investment partner needs to do to succeed here. It's not just capital. So anyway, spend some time, and I think you'll enjoy the interview with Kyle. After that, I want to go back to some TechStrongcon content. On Thursday we ran Emmett Keefe's plenary session, one of the keynotes. On Friday we ran Andrew Schaefer's keynote on what can he do, what can you do. And if you haven't caught that one, please go back. That alone is reason to either go back to Friday's show or go to TechStrongCon. There wasn't about tech. You're not going to learn anything about DevOps here on that one. But Andrew, warning, it can be graphic. Sometimes it's raw. It's Andrew's raw emotion in terms of just coping with what he sees happening in the world, what we all see happening over these last few weeks. And I think it's a real wake-up call, too, about, for people who maybe don't realize the size of the issue here. And it's yes, people getting killed are a bad thing, but it goes beyond even just that about, what are the challenges with, the real inequality in our systems here. And so go back and check out Andrew's. But for today, we were going to go with the third of the four keynotes that we've done. And this one, I think, is really great. It's William Hurley. William is just an no pun intended, an uber successful entrepreneur who's had built several great companies and exits, and has now become one of the world's experts really in quantum computing. And he gave a talk called Quantum Computing for Dummies. And you probably have all heard of quantum computing. Some of you may know more about it than others, but it's a game changer. And William is leading once again in this great area. So it's about a 22-minute presentation. Take the time, check out what William has to say. I think you'll enjoy the Quantum Computing for Dummies. After William, I'll come back with some headlines on our sites today. And then, as usual, it's turn it over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. Charlene has Danny Preston, chief methodologist at Digital AI, which, of course, is the company made up formerly of Zibia Labs and a few other companies here. And I'm just drawing a blank on them as I speak right now. But anyway, Charlene has Danny Preston there with us. And he is going to be giving key takeaways from the 14th Annual State of Agile report. And then we have Mitchell Ashley over in the analyst corner with Mitch. Mitchell has some good commentary today. And then I'll be back to close things up for a Monday here on June 8th. Let's take a commercial break and come right back with our first guest.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hey, everyone. Okay, back now in the studio. As I mentioned, my first guest today is my friend Sheng Liang. He's the CEO of Rancher. I've known Sheng for a good time now, a long time. And Rancher just put up a major update to Longhorn, which is a open source storage project for Kubernetes, or an open source project for storage for Kubernetes that is actually managed now by the CNCF. So excellent stuff there. Sheng's going to tell us all about Longhorn, though, and why it's important, not just if you use Rancher, because it goes beyond Rancher. It's part of the Rancher distribution, but anyone can use it, obviously. So let's now go to Sheng Liang from Rancher.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this interview segment. I'm really happy to be joined by one of my friends from the cloud native world, though actually we know each other, I think, before cloud native was a thing. It's Sheng Liang. Sheng is the CEO of Rancher Labs. Hey, Sheng, welcome to TechStrong TV. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Alan.
It's always our pleasure to have you on, Sheng. So, Sheng, certainly interesting times we are living in. We're getting together like this over video, where usually you and I would see each other at a KubeCon or some other cloud native kind of event. But nevertheless, I'm happy to see you looking healthy and on with us today in video. The news from today is that Rancher has put out the GA version, general availability, of its Longhorn. What would you call it? A Longhorn?
The Kubernetes storage product.
Kubernetes storage. Is it a product, a service? How do you describe? It's a good way to start off.
Yeah, I mean, Longhorn is software. So, just like Rancher. So people use Rancher to set up and manage their Kubernetes clusters. And Longhorn is really a feature of Rancher now. It basically allows you to create persistent storage volumes on any Kubernetes cluster.
Excellent. And this is part of the Rancher distribution.
That's right. It's part of the Rancher product. So think about like Rancher is the platform, and as really an enterprise Kubernetes platform, it really does a lot of things. It stands up Kubernetes clusters. It sets up the networking for the Kubernetes clusters. Sets up the storage for Kubernetes clusters. It sets up access control, authentication, policy, monitoring. So Longhorn is part of it. In fact, Longhorn isn't even in its entirety storage capabilities of Rancher, but it's a very important part.
Absolutely. Now, Longhorn, in and of is a thing in and to itself. It's distributed as part of Rancher, but it is open source, correct?
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting because we've actually been, as a company, we've been really working with Longhorn for many years. It's been such an amazing journey. Rancher itself is almost 6 years old, 5.5 years old. And I think we pretty much started working on Rancher and working on Longhorn from day one, because you really kind of need to solve compute problem. I mean, Rancher is really leveraging Kubernetes to manage all your containers. So there's a very strong focus on compute. But in order to run your applications, especially some of the mission critical enterprise applications, you gotta solve the storage problem. It's like, it's just not an exact analogy. If you think about Rancher as like EC2 or AWS EC2, but then you gotta have that EBS thing, right? Remember, early AWS did not have great support for persistent storage, and everyone was back then were just running, just really simple stateless workloads on ephemeral virtual machine instances. So early days of Kubernetes and early days of containers tend to be like that. And really in the last few years, Kubernetes has really hit its stride, hit mainstream. And if you kind of look at the type of applications that run on Kubernetes today, many of them require some persistent state. And that's really where Longhorn comes in.
Excellent. And good background, Sheng. Theoretically, people can include Longhorn, without necessarily using Rancher OS and the Rancher distribution. Then
that's right.
Right, and
that's right, because that's actually the way Longhorn is designed. Longhorn isn't really a Rancher thing anymore. We worked on it for over 5 years, but about a year ago, we initiated a contribution. We contributed a Longhorn to CNCF. So now Longhorn is actually owned by.
That's what I was getting at.
compute foundation, and it's a sandbox project. And we wanted to do that because there's just been such a vibrant community of users and developers, and by having it not owned by a rancher, by having it owned by having a neutral IP.
Foundation.
Exactly, and people just feel a lot more comfortable to contribute, to adopt, to participate. So really, the usage of Longhorn's really grown in the last 6 to 12 months.
It really helps make it vendor neutral, right? Because that's something that was holding. I always tell people we're in the foundation era of open source. And if you're an Isaac Asimov fan, science fiction, his whole Foundation series. But beyond that, it has enabled, because otherwise, quite frankly, competitors of Rancher would not want to contribute to Longhorn because it would be perceived as helping Rancher because they owned Longhorn, right? By putting it in the foundation, not only could everyone use it without fear of it, helping one company over another, right? It's for the benefit of all, which kind of truly gets to the heart of what open source is about, right? It shouldn't be just to benefit one company, whoever that is.
Yeah, I'm really excited because we're so into this. I recently ran, and thanks to everyone for their support, I actually won a seat on CNCF.
You did?
Technology Oversight Committee. So now I'm a CNCF TOC member. The Technology Oversight Committee is an 11-member organization that actually decides what project should get into CNCF. Obviously, I had nothing to do with Longhorn getting in because that actually happened before I ran. I became a TOC member just a couple months ago. But it's just been, so now I have even more really appreciation into how this thing is done. By the way, it's not, I think having the governance being open, making it vendor neutral is no guarantee for the success of the project. But, the project itself has to have a lot of merit. You can't.
There's an old saying, crap in is crap out, right? You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear.
Exactly. But I think increasingly what we're finding is for storage, networking, compute, those type of fundamental computing infrastructure technologies. I think being open, being vendor neutral, being something being governed by following a process, doesn't have to be Linux Foundation or CNCF, because there's a lot of other perfectly good organizations out there, like the Apache Software Foundation, etc. So being open is sort of the key. It's really not good enough to be just open source, but then everything is controlled by one vendor. People are fairly leery of it these days.
I couldn't agree more with you. A couple of things I want to hit on here, Sheng. First of all, you mentioned you're a member on the TOC board now. I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't mention, we've recently had a change at the executive director. Actually, it was announced Monday, June 1st, right? Dan Kahn, after leading things for a long time, is stepping down, and he's going to be actually within the Linux Foundation, leading a new foundation as part of Linux to help healthcare organizations with COVID-19 related stuff, and that's a worthy cause. We wish Dan well. And the new director comes from GitLab. She was also a CNCF board member, though, and I can't pronounce her name well. It's Priyanka. Yeah, Priyanka's her first name. It's her last. That I can pronounce, Sheng. It's her last name. Sharma, okay. And she's the new executive director. Wish her well. She's a talented woman. I've had the pleasure of meeting her before, and good stuff there. So, interesting. But, the CNCF just keeps gathering momentum and followers and projects. you mentioned that Longhorn is in the sandbox at CNCF, right? So not everyone watching really understands the progression of an open source project through the Linux Foundation kind of structure. Would you mind? I mean, I know there's sandbox and there's incubation and so forth. Why don't you, if you can explain kind of what the levels are as an open source project?
Actually, originally when CNCF was founded, they actually created two levels, and recognizing not every project is at the same level of maturity. So back then, I think when it just got created, they really just had one project, which was Kubernetes, and they were kind of still incubating that project. It was like Google just made the donation, and not everything is even being transferred properly from Google to CNCF yet. They got to fix all the copyright note things, the license, the documentation, so the build release process. So the whole idea is you have to have these projects go through an incubation process before they graduate, and then a lot of projects were fairly successful in going through that process, like Kubernetes, I think, was the first one that graduated. Prometheus, a lot of people know about that project. Yeah. I think now there are probably a few dozen incubating projects now, and probably close to maybe about a dozen graduated projects. So those are those are really projects that CNCF really put the weight behind in terms of marketing and resources. And I think there's also kind of a degree of trust. But then what happened was, it turns out there's just been so much interest in folks wanted to just get their projects into CNCF, be subject to that vendor neutral governance, but not necessarily have all the figured out everything. In some cases, even the project is probably still gaining steam, certainly nowhere at the level of Kubernetes or Prometheus. In some cases, the governance is not quite really in place yet. So these projects are not really even quite ready for incubation. So a few years ago, the TOC created sort of a third level. It's really meant to be a lot more inclusive than even incubation, and just build. I mean, we want to really encourage the wider community to contribute their projects into CNCF, and then and also create a really strong pipeline for the for healthy projects that could eventually become incubation and graduated CNCF projects. So Longhorn is one of those projects.
Fantastic. All right, enough about all that background. Let's focus in a little bit, if we can, Shank. Talk to us about, yes, Longhorn is an open source storage solution or project, for Kubernetes environments. Great. What does it really do? What are some of the key features? It's now GA'd, which gives it a certain level, you would think, a certain level of maturity, a feature set. Give us some of the technical facts there, Shank.
Absolutely. So really what the way storage tend to work in Kubernetes is basically Kubernetes has a driver framework, just like device drivers on Windows. So you if you had storage, like if you had some NetApp storage array or EMC storage array, so you can kind of create a volume on that storage array and connect that to your containers, not unlike a virtual machine runs on some sort of an existing storage. You can also create these volumes locally on the node that these containers run on. So those are sort of traditionally two approaches. You either rely on an external enterprise grade storage array, or you just kind of use local disks, which is easy but not entirely reliable. So what Longhorn does is it actually is 100% software, and then you can kind of deployed into any Kubernetes cluster, it actually takes the local disks on your nodes, and then it does all that replication snapshot. It implements all that enterprise storage feature in software, and then turn it into enterprise grade storage that your containers could just consume. So it's almost like it could be deployed as easy as local disk volumes, but it's as reliable, assuming you have like more than one node. If you have one node, it's no longer, if you have a one node cluster, it's really a degenerated case. But if assuming you have 2 nodes, 3 nodes, then there's redundancy. So it has the same level of reliability and features as some of the enterprise grade storage. So that's really what Longhorn is. It's 100% software that's very easy to deploy. You put it on any Kubernetes cluster. Now you have enterprise grade storage for containers.
Now, you guys have been using it for years. It's been part of Linux Foundation CNCF now for a year and a half, 2 years. Why GA it now? What was the ignition here that said, okay, it's ready for GA?
It's just maturity. I mean, storage technology, the bar for storage technology to hit maturity and production readiness is very, very high. Actually, like we've in the days of agile development and minimum viable products. Like I've seen, if you're kind of building a management feature of some sort, literally you could go from conception to design to coding to like launch production ready probably in less than 6 months. But when it comes to storage, especially enterprise grade storage, it really still takes years and years. So that's kind of what we've been through. And at some point you kind of strike a balance. There's always things you can continue to polish, but once you cross a certain threshold, then people really want to use it. And more importantly, you kind of want to also put your stamp on, I believe this stuff is actually ready for production. And then Rancher as a company, we're a business, we're willing to, support our customers who provide an SLA for that software for customers who put it in production. So it's a very big major milestone for us, and I'm really excited.
Good, congratulations, Sheng. Outside of Longhorn, what's happening with Rancher? Anything to report?
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff is happening. Obviously, Rancher is the name of our company. It's also our flagship product. It's an enterprise Kubernetes platform. We shipped 2.4 just a month ago. It had a huge amount of exciting features. We're now totally heads down working on 2.5. A lot more things are coming up. We're gonna have a new data center focused Kubernetes distro. It's called RKE 2.0 because our early one was RKE 1.0, Rancher Kubernetes engine. And the old RKE 1.0 was just, was pretty much just an off-the-shelf Kubernetes distro. The new one, I'm really excited. It's going to be based on the same technology that we developed for edge computing. So it's going to be based on K3S code base, basically. But it's a lot easier to take, something that's small and then leverage the modularity of Kubernetes and basically put a lot of the data center capabilities back in and turn it into an enterprise grade distro, then they're going the other way around. So the 2.5 essentially K3S and RKE are coming together. And it's great for our customers. They get to leverage the K3S technology, which is just so much easier to operate. But it's also great for us because now we don't have to maintain two different Kubernetes distros anymore. So it also makes us a lot more efficient. We're making a lot of enhancements in Rancher. We're really on the march. I think the journey started even with the last release 2.4, but with a tremendous continuing adoption of Kubernetes everywhere, people are now going to run lots and lots of Kubernetes clusters. I mean, we have customers really are planning to run Kubernetes clusters on factory floors, in IoT gateways. So they're like in the early days, we used to feel pretty good about managing, a few dozen Kubernetes clusters. And with 2.4, we scale it to 2,000 clusters. But the next version, we want to really push our architecture and set up an architecture and prove that we can actually scale to 1 million clusters. So you see in those scenarios, we're not talking about data center grade computing anymore. It is really edge grade, IoT grade kind of deployments with Kubernetes running everywhere. So I'm really excited about that.
I am too. Sounds fantastic. Sheng, we're about out of time. I want to congratulate you on everything going on with Rancher, but also congratulations on Longhorn, right? You guys kind of, founded and gave birth to this, did the right thing, giving it to the CNCF, now having it come out in general availability. We'll be looking forward for continued development when this goes into incubation, perhaps, and it continues to grow and help. Absolutely. All right. Sheng Liang, CEO Rancher here on TechStrong TV. Sheng, thanks for joining us. I hope to speak to you soon.
Thank you, Alan. It was great talking to you.
All right. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back in a moment with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
As I mentioned at the top of the show, I first had the pleasure of meeting Magda Chelly last year in Singapore for the RSA APJ, which as a virtual event is coming up next month, and we will be there, well, virtually, with their DevSecOps program, and Magda may in fact be speaking there. So, but anyway, stayed in touch with Magda since then, and I had a chance to catch up with her recently. It's actually Dr. Magda Chelly. She is the founder of Responsible Cyber. And Magda spent the last, many years in the APAC region. I forget how many countries she's lived in over the last 10 plus years. And, knows the area well, knows what the challenges are from a cyber perspective. And quite frankly, also knows what the challenges are to becoming a successful female entrepreneur CEO. She talks to us a little bit about that and about some of the challenges they're facing over in the APAC region with COVID. In some ways better than what we had here in the U.S., in some ways maybe not. But Magda will tell us all about it. Let's now go to our interview with Magda Chelly of Responsible Cyber.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, Alan Schimmel back here on TechStrong TV. Our next guest is someone I had the pleasure of meeting while I was out in Asia, Singapore, for the RSA conference back in 2019. Of course, this year it's going to be virtual. We will be doing a DevSecOps program there. You might even see this lady on that program. We're going to talk afterwards. But for now, let me introduce you to Magda Chelly of Responsible Cyber. Magda, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hey, Alan, thank you very much for having me. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to discuss again.
Absolutely. So first of all, let me ask, how are things in Singapore and that side of the world here? I know it's kind of unusual times, but we hear good things, that the virus was a little bit better controlled in the area there.
Absolutely. I would say the overall management of the situation was very good in Singapore. But in terms of personally, I'm still I really enjoy saying that I'm stuck in my box room because that's my office that you say, so that I don't leave most of the time. So I'm here like 14 to 16 hours a day.
You're not alone. I think most of us are. What's interesting is though we're stuck in the box, so all we do is work, right? So we're actually working more than we do normally. Anyway, Magda, some of the people in our audience may not be familiar with responsible cyber and your own kind of personal journey. Why don't you give us a little background on you and how you came to responsible cyber?
I would like to start giving a little bit of review about my background. So I'm a telecommunication engineer with a PhD and a master in the same, and then a specialization in cybersecurity. I have worked and lived in 5 different countries before Singapore, where I am now since 5 years. And to add and make it a little bit as a joke, I'm not 20 years old anymore because I got, some people telling me, and I wish I was, but I feel tired in the evening, so that doesn't work anymore.
Magda, when you get my age, you look 20, but go ahead.
But, that's the advantage of having some services, beauty services in Asia. But for the joke, basically, I had the opportunity during my career to migrate and work in different kind of industry in different roles. As part of my latest roles was actually to manage a cybersecurity startup, which I took and built by myself, co-founded with my business partner. And our main objective was to ensure that we address the gap in the market for small and medium businesses, which we did with Responsible Cyber. And Responsible Cyber is building a SaaS platform, helping, again, SMBs or small businesses to address their cybersecurity needs with a very simple, jargon-free cloud, web application. Let's bring it in simple words again. So this is what we are doing.
All right, before we go further, there's a lot of people out here who are working at SMBs or small businesses. This is not just for a Singapore audience, this is worldwide. People can use Responsible Cyber's application. How do they get to it?
We have obviously a website, so definitely if they Google Magda Shelley or Responsible Cyber, they should be very easy to find it. As well, again, across various articles where we talk about cybersecurity for challenges for small enterprises, that as well can be a good opportunity for them to try to understand their own risks and therefore reach out to the team directly who will be able to assist them.
Excellent. And the SMB and smaller business market, frankly, has been one that's been underserved when it comes to cybersecurity, right? At the very, very top of the market, maybe the Fortune 50 even, right, worldwide, they have the resources to do their own cybersecurity, right? Because it takes a lot, that. And so maybe they don't outsource as much, they do a lot in-house. Below that Fortune 50 to, let's say, the Global 2000, Global even 5000, they don't have the resources in-house to do all of their own cybersecurity, but they have the money and they're attractive enough because they're big enough organizations where a lot of so-called MSSPs, managed security service providers, or security consulting companies, that's their market, right? The Global 2000, the Global 5000, companies that must do cybersecurity, have the money to pay. It's critical to their business, but not core to their competency, right? So they outsource, they pay to have someone do their cyber. You get below that, though, and you have companies where cybersecurity is just as critical to their business, but they don't necessarily have big dollars individually. Collectively, it's a very big market, but individually, they don't have those dollars. And so a lot of the bigger cybersecurity companies tend to ignore, right, that segment, and so they're woefully underserved. And so this is a great thing that you're doing.
Thank you, Alan. I think you are spot on. What happens is basically when we're talking about very big multinational companies, you have the group chief information security officer with a very big team, and they are able to answer to their requirements. And I have been in that position as well, where I worked internally with a company within the CISO office. Then we have the next level, the corporate ones, who again are, like you said, happy to invest and get the support of other companies and service providers. But what happens with the 10, 15, 30 employees company, which actually realize that they have regulatory requirements and they need to protect the customer data, but whenever they go and they discuss with any service provider in cybersecurity, they're required to pay $10,000 per month or even more. So obviously that actually makes it really difficult for them to invest in cybersecurity and start their journey. On the other hand, financial restrictions or budgetary limitations are not the only challenges that they face. The problem is also they don't understand cybersecurity. Those are small business owners. They only discuss business aspects of how to upsell their services because they need to generate revenue. So when someone comes to them and try to discuss about cybersecurity and start using, cloud, server, firewall, antivirus, even terms that perhaps for some of us seem very trivial, for them might be very difficult to understand. So they don't know what they need. They don't know where to start, what tool to buy. And that's where, with Responsible Cyber, we actually came up with the idea already several years ago, because we just found that there is a very big gap in the market and those businesses really needed help. And we wanted to make a change or a difference. On top of that, I would like to add something, Ellen, that I guess it's another perspective as well. So, we talked about the big companies, the medium companies, both of those segments looking at cybersecurity. However, we know that the environment or ecosystem is very complex nowadays, and there's no company working independently without collaborating, even with smaller vendors. So the exposure might as well come from those smaller third parties or vendors that do not have the right security in place. On the other hand, the business owner might face challenges to work with the big companies if the big company have the right security assessment in place and do not accept a business that doesn't have the right, visibility on their risk. They don't have the right controls in place. And even I go further, if they don't have the cyber insurance, which is sometimes a requirement in contracts or for companies to be able to provide services for some of the multinationals.
Excellent. I agree with you 100% there, by the way. So let me ask you, and if I don't want this to come across the wrong way, so I'm going to apologize in advance. But I'd like you to share with our audience a little bit. You're obviously a woman, right? And you are well qualified with lots of experience and degrees and everything that any entrepreneur would need, right? In terms of a CV or in terms of background to say, hey, this is someone we want to invest in. This is someone that we think can lead a company to great heights and a great, profitable business. Talk to us a little bit about the climate. Let's do the climate pre-COVID-19, and then if you see, have you seen any changes with the virus in terms of entrepreneurs like yourself starting a business like this, raising capital, going to market, acceptance in the broader, marketplace? Give us the real deal, Magda. Don't hold back.
I think, Alan, is something that I would love to talk about for hours and hours. Entrepreneurship is a passion of mine. So basically, you put me somewhere, I build things, because that's how I really feel that I'm adding value to the community, to the society. And on a larger scale, I can also, bring jobs to people and really create something that will last, hopefully, for a longer term. But when it comes to real world, use cases or how it is to build and start from scratch, it is a little bit different from what we imagine, and perhaps when some of our audience would read in the newspapers, because we tend to say the overnight success story. It's not the case. Anything that requires or will succeed needs really hard work and a lot of commitment and investment. When we started this discussion, I mentioned, 16, 14 hours in my box room. I didn't mean that, because I spent actually 4 years of my life, and not only 4 years, but just to give an overview, the last 4 years of my life, working at least 14 hours a day, every single day. And that means, no vacation, no weekend sometimes, or even if there is a weekend, that will be my one day perhaps, because I still need to recover. So building a company that is profitable requires hard work, but it also requires fitting the market need. I mean, if you have a great product that you build, but you are the only one who is happy to buy it, then you don't have a company. You need to find people who are willing to pay for your services or products. If you don't have that very clearly defined, then again, you don't have a market fit and you don't have a business. You just have an idea or, a dream. So from the hard work, bringing up as well the visibility of the market requirements, finding your ideal customer, and then adapting your product or your service to that ideal customer. And this is the third point. The third point relates to the fact that if a company starts with building an initial minimum viable product, that product will not be perfect from the first, iteration. It needs a certain level of maturity, but you need to go there to the market and start with an MVP, and then you adapt and you ensure that you enhance and improve your product with your clients. And that's very important as well. It also provides visibility to the client that you're trying your best, that you are improving and having a certain, roadmap. You're not just happy with an MVP, you're going forward. And of course, the fourth point, which I believe is also very important, it is that for me, this is me, the serial entrepreneur who started businesses and believes in the old definition of a business, building a business that generates revenue. I mean, we see so many articles, where the businesses are not profitable and people are spending money or investing in businesses that are not profitable. In my view, or in my opinion, a business is successful if it's able to sustain itself and then generates revenue and eventually goes into the next round of investment because it's expanding capabilities, needs to grow faster, it wants to expand internationally, etc. This is how I see it. So those are my 4 tips. In general, around the as well ecosystem, especially in Asia, we're talking about a market that's very different. We're talking about cultural differences, fragmented market requirements. Asia is not one country. It's 13 countries at least, with different legislation, different perception, different sales cycles. So you mentioned, female entrepreneur as well, that there is a different impact of me going, for example, in certain markets. There's no, it's actually common knowledge. There's different perception, different kind of communication. So that will impact the business growth as well. So again, understanding the complexity when it comes to launching a company or launching a new product in a particular region is key to success as well. But that's again coming back to the 4 point that I mentioned to you. So building, ensuring that you understand that it doesn't come overnight, that you build a product or a service that fits the market, that you actually ensure that you generate revenue, and build a business that is profitable are things that, I don't see any entrepreneur starting a journey without understanding those.
Absolutely. And Magda, it's been 2-3 months with this COVID thing. Now, generally, we're seeing actually, like, for instance, on Security Boulevard, our security site, we actually see our readership going way up during COVID. I think, unfortunately, the bad actors have used this situation to double down on hacking, and we see more data breaches and phishing and everything else. So I think, in some sort of perverse way, this has made cybersecurity more top of mind with small businesses, large businesses, everyone, individuals. How do you see it affecting the entrepreneur, the business scene over in Singapore and the rest of Asia? If anything, maybe it hasn't had an effect.
Alan, I think of course it did. It did from the perspective that people went at the beginning when the pandemic was announced, especially into panic mode. And when you mention panic mode, that means that individuals tend not to take any decision and their focus is actually around reading news and trying to understand where's the situation going. So around our community of startups in Asia, we have seen a very big decrease of activity, especially during February, March, because don't forget, we have got this going on for a longer period of time. I mean, I started working from home since February, so I feel like I forgot how the outside world looked like almost.
You're not the only one.
But basically what happens is that after that fear period and panic, people started to come back to the new norm and realizing that they still need to work, as well as the increase of COVID-19 themed attacks made actually companies realize that there's new risks. And especially in terms of digitalization in Asia, the percentage was not that high yet. So with the COVID-19, they didn't have the choice. They needed to go remote. And that means, of course, accelerating their digital transformation. Coming back again, quick speed, going, enabling remote working, and then, oh, oops, I didn't think about security. What about my employee clicking on a phishing link because I didn't have any idea that it exists or it was so easy to happen. And
Exactly.
and that is something that we see, and currently the situation is going in the way where companies realize that, so taking more proactive steps, and especially I'm trying to raise awareness all the time that even, the registers for domains, they have seen a very big increase in COVID-19 domains and coronavirus domains. Most of them are targeted to be used for malicious activities, not to just send news or information about the coronavirus. This is something that companies started to realize.
Yeah, no, we actually had it was, I think, Palo Alto Networks had their research team had done a study, almost 100,000 domains that are COVID or coronavirus related that upon investigation were marked as potentially risky, right? Or outright malware, and so it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem here around the world, and again, it's a shame that when all of us, the whole world, is fighting this pandemic, at the same time we have to have another pandemic in cyber, right? To fight a second front here, another war, and we don't need it. Anyway, Magda, we're almost out of time. I want to thank you for joining us. I know time difference is what they are. It's not the middle of the day over there in Singapore. So thank you for joining with us. It's great to see you. I wish we were coming out to Singapore this July for RSA again, but not. But maybe next year, 2021, we'll be back and hope to see you then. Magda Shelley, Responsible Cyber, here on TechStrong TV. Thanks, Magda.
Thank you very much, Alan. And as a last comment and message to everyone watching this, I would like to say that even though the COVID-19 pandemic, we with Responsible Cyber managed to perform an acquisition which raised the valuation of the company to $7 million, bringing NUS Enterprise and Singtel Innovators shareholders. So with every challenge, there are new opportunities.
There's always a silver cloud. Absolutely. Hey, I love the optimism, Magda. Thank you so much. This is Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
This next interview, I feel like I kind of made a new friend, and I got to tell you, I really enjoyed doing the interview. Kyle York's passion is contagious, and he's launched York IE, which is like a sort of a next-gen investment partner, where more than just capital, they do offer some capital, but they also offer resources, real talent, marketing, sales, business development, networking. They've developed a SaaS platform now that has different modules, and they'll be adding to those modules that whether you're an entrepreneur, small startup team, or an angel investor, I think you'll find very attractive and useful. Kyle has bigger plans even beyond that. He talks a little bit about it. It's a great rollicking interview with Kyle York from York IE. Let's go there now and judge for yourself.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another session here on TechStrong TV. Our guest this session, I think you're going to really love the story and what it's all about, especially if you are entrepreneurial or from a business point of view, or you're maybe a technical person and thinking about, I know I've got a startup in me, I've got a great idea. Let me introduce you to Kyle York from York IE. Kyle, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Kyle, we're gonna get into York IE, and York IE, of course, is intrinsically wound into Kyle York, right, and your own story. So, if you don't mind, I'm gonna turn it over to you and ask you to, take our viewers on a trip down Kyle York kind of journey here, and how you and then we'll talk about York IE.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so I have a pretty interesting story. I think all the way back to its genesis, that happened far before I was born. My maternal grandfather, Henry Spalding, was actually an entrepreneur. He grew up on a farm here in New Hampshire, where I'm from, and ended up in the footwear business. He had a footwear manufacturing business back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s here in New Hampshire that literally made Peggy Fleming's ice skates. They made the Juice Mobile for OJ, his shoe. They invented the first AstroTurf sneaker. And this was the beginnings of multi-generational family business that sort of grounded all of us in this entrepreneurial way. I grew up in the generation before. My dad and mom actually turned that manufacturing business into a sporting good retail business. The reason I like to tell this story is it was your classic small town Main Street SMB. And my parents ran that business just about till 2017 or so when they retired. And it was retail. We were screen printing shirts. We were lacing people up in shoes because all the manufacturing of Generation 1 had all gone overseas years earlier, right? So I was one of 5 sons who grew up in that business and cut our teeth working retail and working parking lot duty because there was an arena across the street, and doing all the hard labor of a sales job in retail, and just learned an incredible amount around business and working with family and working with friends, and all the sort of fundamentals it takes to build a business and be entrepreneurial and put food on the table, and watch my parents put their 5 sons through college, and try to stay out of debt as best they could, and just build a very sustainable and stable business for my life. And so all of us kind of went off to school. We all grew up playing sports, real competitive bunch of brothers. And I ended up going to Bentley University in Waltham, Mass. And
Sure.
I went to Bentley Business School. I knew I wanted to be in business. I knew I wanted to be in more of the marketing kind of brand sales side of business. And, it wasn't ever the intent of necessarily being involved in the family business. My parents loved their little small business and candidly didn't want any of us to disrupt it. They had a good thing going. So they sent us all off on our way and told us to go, find our own passions and take the learnings and obviously the foundation we had to the next level. And so right away at Bentley, Bentley was great back in the early 2000s. They gave everybody a laptop when you walked in the door. They had a trading floor on campus, actually the backup trading floor to the New York Stock Exchange. And it was an amazing experience at how adept they were at technology, and it veered me into technology businesses. And right after my freshman year of school, I ended up first in actually a market research firm and learned a lot about statistical relevance and significance and polling and working cross sector from CPG all the way to tech. And just knew I was like loving marketing and positioning and product strategy as major areas, but also knew I had the gift of gab, right? So the next summer I ended up interning at it was an education technology, vertical SaaS software business. But this is right at the time when licensed software was yesteryear and, software as a service was becoming a new business model, a new technology deployment model. And my first job after my sophomore year of college, this company was called Whipple Hill, ended up selling the Blackbaud in 2014, I believe. But this company was where I cut my teeth. My job was to call every licensed software company and convince them that they should pay more per year for this new version that was in the cloud and it was much better, right? And so when you look at my career, and you look at my career foundation, family business, pragmatic, practical, you work your butt off to eat, right? And if you don't show up, open the doors, close the doors every night and make a profit, you're not going to have a very good lifestyle, right? And then you move into educational software where, the budgets in these schools, it was a private school tech platform, but the budgets in these schools, the budget cycle is very hard. The company being in vertical SaaS needed to not over fundraise to be super capitally efficient to be successful. And my first job, being literally only in SaaS from a real professional perspective. And that was the foundation of my career. For that company, I ended up actually moving to California and running West Coast go-to-market for them, and was sort of chasing the, go West young man. There's great opportunity in technology. And once I was out there, I realized I missed home and my network was all back home. And I thought there was just a different, imagine if I was able to build the same career that people are building here in Silicon Valley, if I'm able to go build this back in my hometown. And serendipitously, one day I got a phone call from one of the co-founders of a company called Dyn that was founded at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Some of you might remember it as dyndns.org originally. It became Dyn, the DNS domain name system provider. And the company was going from Dyn DNS, kind of free to $20 a year, home user built into your home router DNS company, to, hey, this cloud thing's real and this managed hosting thing's real, and the endpoints for businesses and the complexity behind websites are becoming more diversified. I wonder if we could use the DNS protocol to help do, disaster recovery, global load balancing, traffic management. But yet they hadn't done any of that. They had built the technology and the IP, but they had no supporting brand, go-to-market, customer contracts, all the things that would be, pricing models, all the things that would be required to go to scale. And it was a great opportunity for a guy in his mid to late 20s to move back to his hometown. The company was bootstrapped and it figured its way to about $3 million of revenue, all through the website though, e-commerce, but didn't have a single B2B customer. So my job was to come in and build the B2B brand and scale it. So I joined first as VP of Sales and Marketing, then became the company's Chief Revenue Officer. We grew that business from 15 people to 500. We grew it to about 100 million in annual recurring revenue. We raised 100 million of equity. We sold to Oracle for over $500 million. And it was just this phenomenal ride in, learning deeply about what it takes to build a company, on the same principles and premises of that family business foundation. And then when we sold it to Oracle, we ended up spending 3 years inside Oracle. So that was also a
very
heck of a
different
learning.
experience.
But we needed it.
Just
and
for
I
a
think I needed
second,
it.
Kyle.
I'm thinking back to when we first started DevOps.com, March 2014. We published first time. Who was the CTO at Dyn then? Do you remember? It was like Von something.
Yeah, Corey von
Corey.
Wallstein. He came on.
Corey wrote maybe one of the first 5 or 6 articles that we published on DevOps.com.
Well, I
And
did not
Dyn was-
realize the timing.
Yeah. And then unfortunately he left shortly thereafter, I think.
He did, yes. He was there from right around when I joined in 08 to around 2014, I'd say, end of
Yeah,
14.
he left.
We published March. I think Corey probably left that summer, maybe. So yeah, it's a small world, man. It's 6 degrees of separation. So, but as you say, Oracle's not startup land.
Yeah, so spent time in Oracle. Actually spent about 3 years. I GM'd the business unit inside Oracle and then ran a product strategy team. And we lived inside product and engineering. And we were one of 2 go-to-market business-oriented groups in Oracle that were not in the main mothership. So, we had a group, and then there was a group called the Oracle Data Cloud that were considered general business units inside engineering. And our charter basically was continue to repurpose the Dyn technology and people towards the digital and cloud transformation of Oracle itself, right? Try to be a shot in the arm. And honestly had a great time doing it. Keynoted events with 10,000 people, did tons of great interviews, really just had an amazing experience, networked like crazy, and learned a lot about enterprise because Dyn was really more of a developer bottoms up go-to-market motion, inside sales heavy go-to-market, lower average deal sizes, where Oracle obviously was very top down, very CIO board level. And that's just a hugely different environment.
Very
And so
different model.
we learned a lot. The really important part of this story that was happening in parallel was, when you build a company like Dyn that, it's an internet protocol, the DNS is an internet protocol, and we build a managed service on top of it. I mean, the amount of acronyms and complexity into the technology, as you know, not a lot of people got it. And I think the thing that we did best was really the monetization of a protocol that, we did better than anyone else in history. Maybe OpenDNS has done pretty well at it, who sold to Cisco. But I think the 2 companies were the 2 best companies to ever monetize this core IP set. And along the way, because of that, because so many of our customers were also infrastructure or cyber customers or new dev tools that were coming online, or, the internet elite, Twitters, the Netflixes, the Salesforces, the Amazons as clients, I started to get asked a lot, would you advise our startup? Would you consult? Would you help us out? Do you know anyone in your network who could be the you of our company? Do you want to angel invest? And that groundswell that I started, frankly, long before I even had the capital or resources to do it, was the best thing I could have ever done. And I found this niche where, as you found in your career, most of the people building software and cloud companies and cyber companies are the engineers, right? Most of the CEOs of these companies are technical founders by nature. The teams that are built around them tend to be technical by nature, architects, DevOps, tech ops by nature, engineering by nature. And, I happen to be able to understand the technology and pair very nicely to be, a strategy and evangelism and a sales and marketing oriented voice in parallel to them. And so I thought about that a lot as I was still working at Dyn and Oracle, still scaling out my opportunity. I made sure that, in parallel, everything I did, every single extra minute of my time was about the long game and about the future. And that's really the foundation of where York IE was crystallized.
Excellent, man. I feel like a kindred spirit here, man. You kind of describe a lot of my career as well. All right. So now let's talk about York IE.
Exactly. Great. So York IE is really, we call it a hybrid strategic advisory, investment, and operational growth firm. When I think about what we're building, it's a little bit of the repeatability and scalability of everything I talked about on the side of what I did in my career outside of Dyn and Oracle, right? So by the time we left Oracle, we were being asked left and right every single day, are you going to go be an operator or are you going to go be an investor? And I kept on getting hung up in that because I was like, why is that a binary choice? Like, why do I have to go decide to join some VC firm as a managing partner or go be a startup founder again? Why can't I do both? And what I realized was the only way I could do both is if I built a new company on my own to do that myself. And so when I started to look around, we had actually invested in, myself and my two partners, because we had started to create some vehicles after we sold to Oracle. We had actually invested in over 60 companies, and we had 15 exits. We had an IPO, Fastly, who you may know, on the kind of delivery network space, all in our portfolio. And the best stat was we had only 4 deaths of the 60 investments we had ever done in about a half decade or more. And so when we started to look at it and realize like this foundation, and then you layer on a bunch of advisory and independent board seats and other companies we helped co-found on the side, you just had this really, really diversified engagement model where not only capital, but also resource and expertise and go-to-market in a network was incredibly valuable. So I thought to myself, I wonder if York IE could be this hybrid. I wonder if I could scale everything I did 1% of my time if I invest in an operating team around me, and if I invest in a technology platform at the surface that could automate and streamline processes, research, collaboration. How can we build something that is exactly what I did 1% of my time, but now I'm doing 150% of my time? How can I do that with more resource, more technology, more IP, more capability? So that's really what York IE is. It's about being a value-added investment firm that kind of plays in a bunch of markets. I think we're trying to disrupt a little bit of early stage venture. We're trying to disrupt the analyst firms. We're trying to disrupt marketing and PR firms. We're trying to disrupt business consultancies because we just don't believe any of that is scaled down appropriately and made repeatable for startups and growth companies. Unless you've got massive budget and you're funded by Andreessen Horowitz, sometimes it's really hard to get help and without giving away the farm. And so we decided just to try a whole new angle on that.
Excellent, man. I love it. So, and you and I will talk more, but for our conversation today, I know you mentioned you developed a platform, and it's sort of like a SaaS, if I'm not wrong, right? A SaaS-based platform. What does the platform do? What does it offer an entrepreneur or a startup team?
Yeah, so actually we're excited to be launching. We basically productized service modules for the startup ecosystem. First and foremost, we've been incubating them with our existing portfolio. So we've got a couple dozen engagements already very active in this format. But basically what we've done is we've modularized 3 things: business growth strategy, market product strategy, and marketing services, all based on the foundation of this technology, market data and analytics platform. What the platform in essence is it's a private company database where we're aggregating and curating data on private company markets and private company profiles. And we're exposing what we call smart notebooks, which is workflows and methodologies and processes to do market research or to do product analysis or to do go-to-market planning. Because what we've learned over the years is that especially these early stage startups that are founded by tech founders, a lot of times they end up with a marketing manager or a finance manager. They don't quite have a CMO or a CFO or a chief revenue officer or a VP of sales.
Can't afford it.
Right? They can't afford it. And then they're obviously not going to go work with Bain Consulting or McKinsey, and they certainly don't want to pay to go work with Gartner or Forrester or IDC. So you end up with all these different markets. And we saw this even as Dine where, minimums for just a PR firm were 10, 15K a month. Like it's just a non-starter, right? So we decided to build this technology platform. Today, yes, it's a SaaS platform, but it's just internal and proprietary for us to layer on these service modules. But yeah, the idea of it is it's called the Fuel platform. And the idea of it is that, once we eat our own dog food, get all of our portfolio, get all of our co-investors, get all of our consulting clients on the platform, then we'll take it to market when we believe the time is right so that, the whole universe of entrepreneurs and startups and investment companies can also leverage the technology and the platform.
Love it. I love it. There's entrepreneurs out here. There's technical entrepreneurs. I guarantee you, I know our audience out here who are watching this. Some of them have great ideas for startups, but they've never done it. And you know, it, as you know and I know, it could be daunting thinking about, wow, man, I kind of got a good job right now where I make a paycheck, you know, and I've got a wife and kids, or I've got a husband and kids, or what have you. And you know, it's scary to them, right? And you and I have a friend in common, Brad Feld, and we talk about startup communities and tech stars and accelerators. And there's certainly more help for startups today than there were when I started my first tech startup in 1996 or 95, right? But nevertheless, it still can be daunting. For those people out there right now, Kyle, how can they, first of all, how can they reach you at York IE? How, you know, and how can, I mean, I don't want to advertise you giving out free advice or free help, obviously, but
No, but honestly,
how
we
can
are.
they reach out to
I mean,
you? I was just
yeah.
going to say, you are to a limit. I mean, you can't get overwhelmed, but how can they get intaked here? How can they, you know, hook up with you and maybe run some ideas, get some, you know, advice, get some direction? A lot of them just need that.
No, yeah. So I think the way we're thinking about this is kind of like a media company for entrepreneurs and for startups. With where do they begin? So if you think of it, York IE as a funnel, at the very tippity top of the funnel, we're putting out a tremendous amount of content, curriculum, educational resources, ebooks, white papers, all around company building, ideation, discovery, market research, pricing and packaging, go-to-market, you know, motions, product roadmap planning, all the things that we think, you know, are just kind of our gifts to the broader market, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by creating and cultivating a ton of traffic and visibility and awareness and free advice, frankly, we're going to continue to move those people along through the funnel when we really start to like the ideas. They may end up becoming eventually a platform client of the technology. Today, they may be interested in any of our service modules. Over time, they may be a venture investment for us. It's the beauty of sort of vertically integrating our disruptive model of kind of biting off a little bit off of each one of these different sectors, because my big fear was being from New Hampshire and out of the bright lights of the Valley or New York. I kept thinking to myself, if we just become an investment bank or just become a PR firm or just have a SaaS app or just become a seed fund, we're just the like little ant in a sea of thousands of each of them. But if we bite off a little one of each and we can fully integrate them into a vision to reshape the way startups are built, scaled, and monetized, we might just have a massive opportunity to make a big dent and an impact on the market. So right on our website, you can, you know, if you're a high net worth individual, you can back our syndicates. We don't have a fund traditionally. We run the world's largest syndicate on AngelList for SaaS businesses. We also have a high net worth captive syndicate that we run offline. We have so many different vehicles. We have the ability to pitch onto our website. So right on the website, it enables you to submit your pitch. We use Drift for live chat, so you can chat right with an analyst about your idea. So we've tried to democratize and open it up and make it super easy and accessible. We are what we are, though. We are strategy, go-to-market, brand. You know, we're not trying to tell you how to do modern DevOps. That's not our core de facto area. We don't have a recruiting practice per se, right, yet. But these are areas as we grow, we're looking at
We'll talk.
Yeah. We're looking at the startup landscape and saying what's unaffordable, inaccessible, antiquated, non-modern, and let's go disrupt the heck out of that. So, and if that's not more clearly identified with the entrepreneurial mindset and someone who's got a desk job, doing well, getting paid, trust me, saw lots of those folks at Oracle. It really comes down to, it's not just a good idea, it's also your DNA, right? So that's something that we spend a lot of time on with entrepreneurs thinking about being entrepreneurs, is making sure they really know what they're signing up for. Because, you know, I tell people in building Dyn, I mean, there was times I was laying on MRI beds thinking I had brain tumors because I was getting migraines so bad, right? Like it's not all rosy. In hindsight, I'm like, damn, that was awesome. You know, that was
you
great.
Thought you were dying, it wasn't quite. Yeah, I've been there. But that's
so please reach out to us. Yeah, exactly. So,
and it's yorkie.com.
It's york.ie actually, and there's a story behind that only domain name geeks would like. It's an Irish TLD, a top level domain. But yeah, it's york.ie, and we're across social media at York Growth. And yeah, I mean, there's tons of different ways to engage and collaborate with us. And And, the reason we built the model the way we built it, Alan, was all about being entrepreneur first. And, the reason we don't have a traditional fund is we didn't want to get paid by LPs to deploy capital, right? The whole model is if we can work for and with entrepreneurs, we're hedging our capital investments by being more involved, being more supportive,
Sweat.
more value add. So it's a fun experience.
Love it. Kyle, we're out of time. I got to call it. But you know what? We'll have you back on. We'll discuss this more.
Perfect.
For now, though, this is Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV. You just listened to Kyle York of York IE. I hope it got you jazzed. You can't buy passion. Remember that. All right. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
I got the burgers. I went to Bun Barn, Beef Patty Palace, Tomato Town.
Oh, thanks for getting all this, honey.
No problem. Getting all of it just took about 2 hours.
I just wish there was an easier way to get all your burger fixings from one place,
Yeah.
Dad, you didn't go to Mayo King?
You know our car doesn't fit in their drive-thru. I went to Mustard Chef.
I hate this burger.
He also went to ketchup.
When you're building something using components that don't work together easily, things could get ugly, fast. You wouldn't live like this, so don't make your DevOps team live like this.
This lack of burger cohesion is hard on all of us, Cheryl.
GitLab is the only single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle.
Okay, back here in our studio, our next segment is from TechStrongcon. We have played 2 of the 4 plenary keynote sessions. This third one is from William Hurley. William has had just a crazy successful career in tech as an entrepreneur, always staying on sort of the edge, the cutting edge of technology. His latest company is all about quantum computing, and William's really become one of the experts in quantum computing out there. At TechStrongCon, his presentation was called Quantum Computing for Dummies. I don't know how much you know about quantum computing, but it really promises to be the game changer here. And this is a great way to get introduced to it. So let's hear from William Hurley, who presented at TechStrongCon, Quantum Computing for Dummies.
All right. So, hey everybody, it's Hurley. I'm super happy to be here at TechStrongCon today to talk to you about quantum computing. So I want to jump into it with kind of a little bit of an overview of my personal story coming into quantum computing. And specifically, I want to say, the session is Quantum Computing for Dummies, and quantum computing is absolutely not for dummies. When I first got into it, I understood that there would be a lot of physics, but it can be infinitely more complex than you think at first. And at the same time, there are so many ways to start getting into this new programming field, to start understanding how the physics work, how these machines work. And what we really want to do today is kind of break it down for you and hopefully leave you with a sense of empowerment that you can go forth today, use some of the free tools we mentioned, use some of the resources we mentioned, and actually get started playing with quantum computing. So with that, I want to jump right into it. I believe that this, not artificial intelligence, is the space race of our generation. That is to say that I don't believe that you can have artificial intelligence without some form of non-von Neumann architecture, and I believe quantum computing will be a big part of that. If you look at the amount of money over the last 5-10 years that countries have been pouring into this, tens of billions of dollars in China and Sweden and the US, everywhere around the world, Japan, France, anywhere you can name, then you kind of start to understand why this kind of computing is so important and why we need to be spending more time educating people earlier on this new technology. But again, I think this is the space race of our generation. This will shift global power. It will change the way everything from stocks are traded to drugs are discovered. So it's incredibly important that we focus on this technology. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this talk for the next 20 or so minutes. So what is quantum computing again? Hurley, you just rambled and you said all that stuff and you didn't tell us what it is. Well, one of the easiest ways to explain it is with a coin. So I have this coin here, and I have a tails, and I have a heads. And so imagine that classical computing, your iPhone, your iPad, your computer you use every day, even high performance computes in very large data centers, these things are all driven by a binary von Neumann architecture, meaning that if I take that coin, I place it on a flat surface, if it's heads up, it's a 1. If it's tails up, it's a 0. And on that flat surface, it can only be in one of those two states. So think of that kind of like the binary state and function of classical computing. And now imagine that with quantum computing, I take that same coin and I flip it in the air. And when I flip that coin in the air, then at the apex, is it a heads or is it a tails? And the fact is that it's in a superposition as it's spinning of both heads and tails. And so if you think about that, then you can start to understand how qubits work. And the science of qubits is pretty simple. You basically have a 2-level mechanical system. It allows for that superposition we just described with that coin. And that means that we can measure probabilistic outcomes. And so therefore, a qubit can be, think of it like a block sphere spinning, and it can be in a straight up 1 or down 0, or anywhere in that 360 degrees as you're manipulating it. And so basically this allows for an incredible new area of computational capabilities. Problems that would take tens of thousands of years, millions of years, that could now potentially be solved in a day or a week or a month. And this can revolutionize society. This can revolutionize technology as we know it. This is the first time in the history of computing we have deviated from some pretty simple binary type processing functions, right? This is going to be the biggest change in the next 10 years, 20 years in computing since its existence, since it began. So understanding how qubit operations work is pretty simple. We have different applications that we can apply to these qubits, and we can spin these qubits in various ways. And because this is quantum computing for dummies, we're not going to delve too far into the math, but think of it as in these brackets, you see the possible states and outcomes with each of these, with X, Y, Z, and then H. And you can see with those little yellow lines kind of the deviation and where we're spinning. So it's pretty complicated. The way these machines are built, there's ion traps, there's adiabatic systems, there's classical circuit gate type systems and topology systems as well. You can build a quantum computer in any one of a dozen ways. But the basic idea is that you're taking some particle, you're suspending it somehow, maybe you're trapping it with lasers, maybe you're cooling it down to absolute zero, and then you're manipulating that. Again, think of it like this block sphere by spinning it in different operations and therefore getting different probabilistic outcomes. So why do we need these computers? You know, that's a great question. A lot of people in the press either overemphasize the implications it has on security and other topics, or they underplay this dramatic shift that we're about to go through. But when you get right down to it, the state of high-performance computing is changing. We're starting to run into some barriers. We have high-performance compute centers, we have TPUs, tensor processing units, GPUs, graphic processing units, we have FPGAs, and we have combinations of them. IBM's new supercomputer is a combination of classical processors and some graphics processing units, right? There's a bunch of different things you can do, but if you start looking at the problems, we're reaching a computational bottleneck. That is to say that data is growing exponentially, but our processing power isn't keeping up. And then on top of that, you have a series of problems that are very computationally complex, meaning that it's not that a classical computer couldn't solve them. It's just that it may take them 10, 20, 30 years, 300 years, 3 million years to solve. So when you look at that, and you look at the past and the present and the future, we kind of have this interjection of quantum as a technology years ago. This is something that was worked on in the labs. IBM has, I believe, a 70-year history in the space. It is not new, but we're starting to get to the material science breakthroughs and the physics discoveries, et cetera, to make it real. So today, we're just seeing a potential of a fraction of what quantum computing can do. You have very small machines, 53 qubits, 17 qubits. You know, we're hoping to get to a couple hundred qubits in the next 24 months. But for each qubit, is exponentially more powerful than a classical bit. So by some people's calculations, one classical bit would equal about 1 qubit, rather, would equal 1 billion classical bits. So if you think about that, these things are very, very powerful. And it's super important that with everything we're doing, creating more data, generating more problems, from healthcare to the environment to material sciences to going to Mars, all of these things are going to require the kind of computational capabilities that quantum computing offers. So the way I like to think about it is this. We used to cross from one side of the United States to the other, and that journey took weeks and months sometimes, and someone died along the way, and it was horrible. And then the train came along, and you could cross the country in about a week. All right, and trains are great. Many places all over the world still use them, but no matter how far you go, eventually you run into an ocean. And so we have airplane travel that augments train travel. You can still take the Acela from New York to DC. We didn't get rid of trains, but airplanes provide this completely new capability. You can fly from New York to Japan, for example. And so think of this the same way. So classical computers they're not going to go away. Quantum computers aren't going to replace them. They haven't outlived their function, but eventually they reach a limitation. And that's where quantum computing comes into play. And we want to see these things work together. So this is not a situation in where you have a computer that comes in and it replaces all classical computers. That's not going to happen. In fact, I believe these things will end up being more like TPUs, more like GPUs. So they'll be coprocessors. So you do what we call full program execution. We'll write a program that goes through and does all of the work we want, and then it'll stop, send off the computational complexity to a quantum computer, get an answer back, and continue along the path. That's probably the most likely scenario for the way these things are going to end up working. But continuing on, let's talk about the power of a quantum algorithm. Let's put it into a perspective where maybe you'll understand. So we understand that we're using quantum mechanics and quantum physics to create these machines. We understand that they are a non-binary system, that we can use that block sphere and rotate it in any position we want, and that gives us the ability to do probabilistic outcomes. But where does the rubber meet the road? How is that actually practical? How does that provide value to us as users? Well, think about the classical drunk example. So that's to say that we're going to walk into a bar and we want to look for our friend, and everybody's wearing the same team shirt. There's 50 of them lined across the bar. And we're going to walk up to somebody and we're going to tap them on the shoulder and see if it's our friend. And if it's not, we're going to flip that coin we have. When we flip that coin, if it's heads, we're going to go one step to the right. If it's tails, we're going to go one step to the left. And so when you look at that, basically, that means that we're going to have this very random, jagged way of going through that line to try to find the thing we're looking for. So with the first step, we go 50%, have a 50% chance of going right or 50% chance of going left. And with each concurrent step, we go the same way. So we're kind of like randomly almost going through this crowd, looking for this person that we're looking for, trying to find them with the flip of a coin. So remember, we talked about that classical system earlier, being it's heads up, then it's a 1, it's tails up, it's a 0, kind of right or left. Well, turns out, basically, that ends up being like a drunken walk. We can check after n steps, probability density, and somewhere in the standard deviation, we might find our friend. So if our friend is out on the right or all the way out on the left, we might not find them as easy with this method. And so we can use quantum superposition, again, the ability for that bit to be in a kind of 1, kind of 0 state till we measure it and it collapses. And we can use the math behind that to create something cool called the quantum drunk. So unlike our classical drunk, our quantum drunk can actually go right and left at the same time. And because of that, then that allows us to search this massive area a lot faster. So think about that again. We're sitting at the bar, we tap someone on the shoulder, we flip a coin, we go right, we tap someone on the shoulder, we flip a coin, we go left, we're back to where we started, so we flip it again, we go left again. That's going to end up in that kind of bell curve search. With the quantum drunk, we're actually able to be exponentially better. So with the slide I'm showing you now, take a look at the blue guy. That's going to be our classical drunk. So we're flipping that coin, we're kind of randomly going around, looking to where we're going for to get to this exit, and eventually we get there. And you may know, spill our beer along the way. But With our quantum drunk, we're able to actually go through all of those possibilities in a much shorter time frame, meaning that it's exponentially better and faster to get results. So there's a lot of examples of this. Searching for information using things like Grover's search algorithm, it would be a good one. There's a lot of ways that this is going to improve your life. You may not use a quantum computer, but you're going to be affected by them. Google will be using them to search and categorize information. So you'll be able to search it from your phone. You won't know you're using a quantum computer, but it'll affect you. Drugs you may take to cure some condition you have might have been discovered by this technology. The way financial trading works, the way pricing discovery works, portfolio optimization. This technology is poised to affect everything in your life and everything that affects your life. And again, in this example, it's super important to understand. We have the bell curve in our classical random walk, but we have this vampire phase in our quantum walk, meaning that we search mostly on the side and we search a wider area faster. So we get to the result we're looking for. Now, what that means in short is the power of a quantum algorithm is that we can explore more steps and exponentially faster in the same amount of time, right? So the power behind Grover's search algorithm that I mentioned earlier, we're looking for an oracle, that's where you really start seeing this increase in efficiency. And as we all know, search is something that affects all of our lives right now. So where's quantum computing today? So we talked about kind of what it is. We can do these superposition, these probabilistic outcomes. We've given an example with this power of a quantum algorithm with the kind of drunken walk versus the quantum walk. But where's the reality? You hear about 53 qubits, 70 qubits. Well, the processor in my phone has 3 billion transistors at almost 5 nanometers. So that sounds like it's way more powerful. And that's not necessarily true. Again, these are completely different ways. So the number of bits don't necessarily equal the usefulness or the power. But the problem isn't with the qubits. You can add qubits easy, but you get more noise. And the noise becomes a problem. The fidelity of the qubits becomes an issue. But at Strangeworks, we see a different problem. And that's why we're so interested in giving this session at TechStrongcon. Because we see the problem as not being the computers, but being the workforce. If I had a 1 million qubit machine today and I dropped it in the middle of Tokyo or San Francisco or London or New York, there would be no one who knew how to program it. There would be no one who could take advantage of it. And anybody who tells you that they can is completely out of their mind, right? There is not enough education on the computer science side and not enough education on the quantum computing side or the quantum physics side. We need multi-diverse teams based in all of these sciences and data science and understanding what an enterprise needs working together. And so the problem with quantum computing today is the fact that you're not involved, the people you know aren't involved, that people aren't taking enough interest in the biggest technological shift in the history of computing. And so there's limited access to the computers, but we're going to talk about how we're addressing that. But there's sparse talent. Maybe 100 people worldwide that matter in quantum, maybe another 100 or 200 outside of that, and that's it. So there's 23 million developers worldwide, and we're on a mission to get every single one of you involved in quantum computing. And that's a long-term play. So the other reason you don't see some interest is it's not like you start learning quantum computing today, and next year you're gonna have a new high-paying job. It's gonna happen sometime between today and some point in the future, and we don't know when. But we do believe that preparing now is the wisest choice. So what do we think should happen? Well, we need to make it available. We need to democratize access to quantum computing and the technologies. We need to encourage collaboration, and we need to focus on that diversity. You need physicists and researchers and developers and mathematicians and finance people, or maybe chemical people, and all of these problems are going to take teams to solve. The algorithms will be developed most likely open source, most likely in the open, most likely by geographically dispersed teams collaborating across a quantum platform. So what's going to arrive then? Well, as I said, it could be tomorrow or some amount of tomorrows between now and some point in the future. But we believe that you kind of take that old Viking phrase and paraphrase it, say 20 years is when the pessimists think it'll be here, optimists think it'll be here in 3 years, some people say a year even. We believe that you should be preparing today. We think you should be learning how to do this, learning the tools, learning the technologies, understanding the parts about the physics you don't understand, and really getting yourself in a position to take advantage of this. So why? Can we put it into financial terms? Yes. Why is this so important? Creating massive opportunities. Boston Consulting Group did an amazing analysis. It is the best one so far, I believe. That says the next 3 to 5 years are kind of the noisy intermediate quantum area, and that's going to have about $2 to $5 billion of estimated impact on operating income for enterprises. So there'll be material simulations that reduce expense and time-consuming trial and error lab testing. That's kind of where that'll be used. In 10 years, they'll have a broad quantum advantage. That'll be a $25 to $50 billion impact on operating income of enterprise. And that's going to be near real-time risk assessment for financial services, quants, hedge funds, things like that. And then 20 years plus, they'll be fault-tolerant, full-scale quantum computing, general purpose quantum computer, if you will. And that's $450 to $850 billion in impact to the operating income of enterprises. And that'll be custom drug designs and material sciences and all manner of things. So this is going to make a tremendous impact technologically. It's going to make a tremendous impact financially. And I believe it's going to make a tremendous impact environmentally and in society in general. So how can you get started? Okay, Worley, you've talked to us about quantum computing. It's really hard. You thought you were going to learn it easy when you started. It turns out you didn't do so well. It's all this complexity. You have to have more than one person in these teams. Well, that's what we wanted to do as kind of our gift to the community in general. And we started by forming a partnership with Stack Overflow. Free website, free resource. Many of you probably already use it. We jokingly call it herding Schrodinger's cats. But we now have over 8,900 developers and physicists working together answering quantum computing questions. It's about 1,300 people on there every day, and about 85% of the questions are answered. In the last 2 years that we built this out, there's over 2,500 questions. Everything from how you use IBM's Qiskit or Google Circ to whether a D-Wave annealer is better than an ion trap machine, to the physics, to the math, the linear algebra. There are questions that cover everything. It's an amazing resource to start. But we wanted to take it a little further. And so to do that, we said, look, there's this big mess of questions. Where do I start? Should I start learning how to program an ion trap machine? Is it different than a circuit gate machine? What about topological? Should I use Python? Do you use Qiskit? Frameworks like Forest? Frameworks like Ocean, Leap? There's so many questions. We wanted to take that for free and bottle it all up and put the power of quantum all in one place, accessible to everyone at quantumcomputing.com. You can sign up for the beta today. We're going to be launching it. As long as you share your work with the community at large, as long as you partner and you're a good community member, it's free. It's a very easy way to get started, and you can access IBM's Qiskit, Google Circ, D-Wave, Leap and Ocean, BlueCat from Japan, Rigetti's Forest, on, and we continue to add new capabilities, and we have a library of experiments from you to draw from. I mean, things like Shor's algorithm, to teleportation, to Grover's search that we mentioned earlier. You can go in, take the code, read about it, fork it, start your own project, play around with it, and run it in all these simulators. And if you have access, run it all the way out to an actual quantum machine. So this is a really, really big step, we think, in quantum computing, which is democratizing it, making it more accessible, getting more people involved. Stack Overflow and quantumcomputing.com are going to be the tip of the spear of that. We have even more planned for the future. So with that, I'll thank you for your time. And if you have questions, please feel free to contact me. My information is on this last slide, Worley@strangeworks.com. You can even text me. That is my cell number. It is everywhere on the internet, so it's pointless to try to keep it private at this point. Or you can actually just go to quantumcomputing.com, sign up, and if you have questions, put in a support ticket or go to Stack Overflow and ask the community question, get an answer there. So thank you very much for having me at TechStrongcon today. I look forward to seeing all of you being involved with quantum computing in the near future. Thanks and have a great day.
wow, we had some really great content already this morning. I get excited watching William Hurley's presentation on quantum computing. But anyway, it's time now for the news. And let's go, as usual, to some of the headlines we have at Security Boulevard and Container Journal and DevOps.com. They're not all of the stories there, but it gives you a little flavor. Over on DevOps.com, we have the top 5 challenges to overcome with Heroku logging. Still out there, a good, just, top 5 kind of article. Commuta updates their BPM platform, and AWS automates Windows Server migration, and that's over on our IT is Code section of DevOps.com. And then over on Container Journal, we have Solo.io. I like that company. They're doing really good things in cloud native. They've added developer portal for Istio, Service Mesh. And then Snapped brings ADC to Kubernetes. So please check that one out. I think it's important. And then over on Security Boulevard, we have After the Pandemic, What the Post-COVID-19 IT World May Look Like. Of course, a little crystal ball gazing or belly button gazing, I don't know. But have a look, have a read, and see what you think. I think everyone has an opinion on this, and who knows. Also on the Boulevard, though, we have Why Ransomware Isn't Going Away Anytime Soon. And unfortunately, I agree 100%. It's a real, it's beyond a nuisance. It's a real pain, and until we figure something out there, though, it's not going away. Anyway, that's over on news today. Of course, please go visit Security Boulevard and DevOps.com and Container Journal. There's so much more than me just reading you a couple headlines here. But for now, we're going to head over to Charlene O'Hanlon. And Charlene has a great guest today. So Charlene, take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops. And now I have the pleasure of interviewing Danny Preston, who's the Chief Methodologist at Digital AI. Hey, Danny, how are you?
Hey, doing great. Good morning.
Good. Well, I'm so glad you were able to join me today. And hoping to talk to you a little bit about the State of Agile report that you guys just came out with.
Yes, yeah, pretty exciting stuff. And it's always, I always kind of wait with bated breath to kind of see what's going to come up, where the new trends and those kind of things. So it's going to be fun to get into that.
Excellent. Well, first, I guess we should talk a little bit about digital AI, because you guys you're a new company, but you're also kind of formed from 3 very established companies. So can we kind of start a little bit by you talking a little bit about digital AI and what you guys are all about?
Absolutely, yeah. So the folks that are running digital.ai and really kind of have a vision for that realized maybe about a year and a half ago, that there's a real need for value stream management in the marketplace, kind of an end-to-end view of how value is flowing through the organization. So they started to acquire companies that would basically build out that chain. And then the idea is stitching these together over time. We'll be able to offer an end-to-end solution to show how value is flowing. So currently in the stack, CollabNet version 1 was the first acquisition. So we've got kind of that whole ALM and also some ability to orchestrate. Zebia Labs added a lot more capabilities into our orchestration layers, so able to kind of get vision all the way down to stories into a production environment. And then ArcSand's the latest acquisition, which kind of rounds out the security component of that. So you've got a full DevSecOps value stream right now. And there'll be more acquisitions to come. It's a pretty exciting place to be right now.
Oh, that's awesome. So you guys collectively have a wealth of experience in the DevOps space, and that's pretty nifty stuff right there. Then, so the State of Agile report. This is the 14th, correct?
That's right.
All right. So what are some of the key findings that you guys found out with this latest report?
Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting stuff, and maybe just starting out with the very beginning of that report, it gets into the demographics of who's actually responding. And it's been interesting over the years where we saw Agile, it kind of started with, thought leaders in America, but it's continued to expand internationally. And so overall, we're seeing a lot more respondents outside of America. this year. 15% countries outside the US are responding versus previous years. It's been much lower. South America grew the most. That's kind of interesting to see Agile expanding down that way. And then just the changing landscape. We've kind of known for a while waterfall's kind of going out of vogue. There's no big waterfall conferences, right? And we're seeing that with respondents as well, where if you compare 4 or 5 years ago, there were a lot of respondents that identified as project managers, kind of those traditional roles. Now that's just completely through the floor, and you're seeing a lot more Agile coaches, Scrum Masters respond to the survey. So there's been, while we've kind of sensed that in the industry, the numbers prove it out, been a big reversal in who's responding. So overall, just as far as people responding to the survey, you're seeing Agile continue to grow really internationally around the world, and then it's just continued to take a deeper hold in that.
Excellent. So are there certain areas of kind of the Agile methodologies or Agile practices that that you've seen with this report kind of maybe increase or decrease over last year?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So as you get into thinking about Agile maturity and how it's flowing through the orgs and what are organizations adopting, so there's a lot of different facets of that. One immediate kind of finding, which was kind of interesting, if you rewind 4 years ago, only 9% of companies would say that all the teams in the organization were doing Agile. It was kind of a smaller group. That's doubled today. So we're definitely seeing Agile penetrate further into organizations. Organizations have been on their Agile journey a little bit longer. Big organizations are starting to, obviously they've been on an Agile journey. They started it maybe 5 years ago, and now it's continuing to mature. So that's been really big. As far as methodologies, though, it's not been a big shift. Where Scrum was 58% 5 years ago, it's still 58% of what people are doing now. So there's not been this kind of disruptive methodology that's changed the landscape. It's still, pretty much Scrum XP hybrid are going to be two of your most popular there.
Okay.
So not a big shift there. And the one thing I would say that's interesting is you think through maturity, if teams report what core ceremonies they actually do in their Scrum process, and more teams are reporting doing those core ceremonies. Where 5 years ago, I was scratching my head thinking, how are you doing Scrum if you don't have sprint planning or daily stand-ups or things like that? And so you're seeing more and more people report that they are doing those ceremonies now. So you definitely see Scrum maturing and continuing to deepen in organizations.
Excellent. I wonder if that's kind of a byproduct of kind of learning as you go with Agile. The fact that that maturity includes having to do a lot of the steps that maybe they thought before were not as important or critical. So
now it's hard to read the tea leaves completely on that, Charlene, but it's interesting if you think about scaling methodologies. So these are, scaled Agile framework, DAD, less, things like that. In that world, they can come across kind of prescriptive. I don't think the intention of any of those is to be overly prescriptive, but it's definitely a little bit more prescriptive than just, hey, here's 4 core ceremonies, go be awesome. In that world, it does seem like there is a rise of scaling frameworks, and more people are doing that. So there was a pretty big shift where if you were on 5 years ago, the most popular scaling methodology was just doing Scrum of Scrums, kind of winging it, trying to figure out how to work across teams. SAFe has had a dramatic rise over the past 5 years. So they're up, the leading methodology now in that world. But as a whole, just winging it has really gone down. So it does appear, while there is kind of this learning thing, that people do want a little bit of a playbook to go by, especially as they're trying to mature and understand what the next step is on their journey.
All right, great. So did the report look at DevOps at all in the, in the context of Agile? Is it, kind of maybe DevOps versus Agile or DevOps and Agile kind of working side by side? Or how did you guys approach looking at DevOps?
Yeah, so definitely took a look into DevOps, and trying to pull up my statistics on that right now. But there was a definite rise in the number of initiatives growing. So up 3% just from last year, but up 90% from 5 years ago. People were reporting that they are starting or they're involved in a DevOps initiative. So a dramatic growth over 5 years in DevOps, and a significant growth over just this past year. And if you think about it, not to get too philosophical, I'd have to pull out my pipe and maybe get in an armchair for that. But you are talking to the methodology guy, right? So the interesting thing, so Scrum kind of got its roots there back in 2001, and it was really kind of team focused, lightweight stuff. And then over time, you see this pull for scaling Scrum, where teams realized, hey, I need more dependency management. I can't get everything done in this one team that I wanted to get done. So that's kind of where in like 2009, 2011, you start to see the rise of scaling Scrum. And then as they got into that, they realized the next big blocker wasn't development, it was actually getting stuff into production, which kind of ushered in this rise of DevOps, where again, 5 years ago, that wasn't even a question on a survey, right? And now it's a large percentage of companies, 90% are saying there's a significant value in DevOps, and they're looking to explore that. So that was a natural kind of rise. As you get into DevOps, the next big progression is realizing, okay, now I can get an idea, I can develop it, I can get in production, but there's other blockers in the organization. I need to identify those. So you're starting to see that rise in value stream management, and that's definitely reflected here in the survey, where more organizations are reporting a need for value stream management. As you get into that, the next big ship to follow is you're realizing kind of, all right, where are my big organizational blockers? You start to get this DevSecOps deal, which that's a term, I guess it started to come up about 2 years ago or so, and now it's getting to be more in vogue, where it's not just enough to build something, get it in production. We actually have to make sure it's secure. So there's definitely that rise. And I feel like the next big thing that organizations are looking for, will be looking for, if you kind of project into the future, what's the next major conference talk you want to be preparing for, the next thing you want to build out is capabilities around business agility. So value stream management gives us a view into where the challenges are. And then business agility, which DevSecOps would be kind of a subset of that in my mind, where we've got the whole business organized around value, would be another place to make investments and speed up. So you kind of see that trend over the time.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say this year, it's kind of the little bit where you start to see that inkling of business agility. 30% of the respondents said that they're starting to use Agile principles outside of IT and development. So you're beginning to kind of see that door crack open.
Well, so that actually is a great seg into my next question, which is, where do you think we are in that maturity curve for Agile and DevOps? I mean, are we kind of, have we hit the peak for Agile and are kind of on the downward slide, or are we seeing kind of some natural progression from Agile to DevOps, and how are organizations approaching those these days?
Yeah, so the interesting thing, you would think, wow, we've been doing Agile since 2001. Surely we've got it figured out, as an industry. The reality is that's not the case. In this past year's survey, 84% of respondents said their organizations were below a high level of competency with their Agile practices. So that's kind of like those beginning, like, are we doing Scrum well? And so there's a lot of room for ongoing improvements as you get into that. And the other interesting thing is the blockers to actually extending your Agile transformation. Largely, they've shuffled a little bit in the top 4, but largely the same things that were in the top 4 5 years ago are still in the top 4 today, meaning more leadership support and culture that embraces change. So those are areas where it still seems to be a lot of growth on that. While I've seen leadership getting more into this, especially as previous generations have kind of retired or moved into other areas, then the next generation of leaders is emerging. 14 years is kind of a big enough span. You can see some of that shift, but it still hasn't gone far enough. And so we can't delegate this change. As leaders, we actually have to own it and understand what that whole ecosystem's like and begin to stand that up.
Interesting. I didn't think that culture would play as big a role in hindering Agile adoption, especially since it's quite literally a business driver, and companies who adopt these methodologies are proven to be more successful, and it just kind of boggles my mind that executive leadership still hasn't hit the levels where it really should be for this adoption. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think what you do see, so there has been a big shift if you rewind 5 years and compare to today. 5 years ago, one of the biggest blockers was the pervasiveness of traditional methodologies, basically meaning we've got to unseat waterfall or some of the older kind of long iteration kind of methodologies. And so that has significantly lower. It's kind of gone from one of the top 4 to very, very low now. So you're definitely seeing like a mental shift away from waterfall. And it's kind of almost like people who 5 years ago would say, I think waterfall's better, are now, hiding and not going to say that out loud, right? They might, say it privately, but it's not the popular thing anymore. But the leadership mindset shift, I see a lot of organizations where now we're using Agile terms, or we're trying to be the cool kids and think Agile, but then at the same time, we're asking, when can all the scope be done, and how many more people do I need to add to the org to make it happen by this time? Like, still kind of thinking in that waterfall triple constraint. So I think what's missing there is the core principles that it takes to actually get the benefit out of Agile. People are starting to embrace the terminology and maybe, starting to think in terms of iterations, but the principles that would guide that, limiting batch size, trying to keep teams working at a sustainable work pace, things like that, that's kind of almost been dismissed. And I think that's a core part of the whole ecosystem you can't easily dismiss.
So do you think maybe part of that has to do with just a plain old education? You don't know, may not understand what you don't know. So is it possible that they're kind of talking the talk, but they don't really actually know how to walk the walk?
I think exactly. And unfortunately, in the industry, when we think education, we generally are thinking 2-day certification class. And if you can pass the test, surely you must know the material. The reality is, I think what people need to actually learn is almost more of like a partnership, an apprenticeship, a conversation. I feel like as adults, we tend to learn in 2-way conversation a lot better than we do in 1-way conversation. And so I'm seeing a big need for communities of practice and building out those places where those conversations can happen, and we can help encourage each other to understand the next big step that's going to improve things. So that's a definite shift. So I would say, while class has been great, and certainly the knowledge level across organizations I worked with has dramatically improved. Like, we're understanding, when I use a term like an iteration, people know what that means across organizations. It's starting to get more pervasive. The reality of what makes Scrum happen, what makes it really magical, that's kind of missing. And so it's almost like this focus on terms and terminology and not on the underlying principles, which to me are the key part of it.
Right. Okay. All right. So kind of pivoting a little bit here, when we're talking about Agile in an organization, obviously this report was compiled before, the pandemic hit and everybody was sent home, and basically everybody's work lives were turned upside down. So do you think that what's been happening and actually even moving forward, do you think that's going to have any impact on the way organizations approach Agile and other different DevOps or other different ways of working? Just kind of moving forward, recognizing that they may not have a full staff in an office anymore. It may not be anymore that just throw stuff over the wall and see what happens. How do you think it's going to impact things?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We did do a quote mini survey after the pandemic, just to see what had changed on the survey prior to pandemic versus post-pandemic. So again, like it wasn't near the audience level that we had in the regular survey, just because we didn't have as long to run it. Mm-hmm. But I think it was significant in what we found. And so this was some interesting statistics came out of that. But 55% of the people in that survey say their company plans to increase the use of Agile in the next 12 to 24 months. That's 13% more than the survey that just concluded prior to the pandemic. So definitely a big, 13% more companies are saying we got to get serious about this. And so it's almost like that burning platform is starting to get there. 43% said that their momentum for Agile adoption has increased over the past 90 days. And then 15% said it's increased significantly. So that's that part where I think leaders have been hearing, hey, I think there's some benefits. They probably apply to our area. It's time to get serious about it. And then 33% say they've already increased or expanded their Agile adoption in the past 90 days. And mainly that was kind of helping manage distributed teams, which if you think about it, the teams that I've worked with that have struggled the least, it makes sense where they've been mature Agile, they've got core ceremonies set up, things like daily stamps, they're used to doing that. Transitioning that to a remote world just meant I need to get good at a video conferencing system, but they've already got those checkpoints. The people that I noticed that really struggled through the pandemic working remote didn't have those regular tie-ins with their the people they do work with, their teams. And so they were really feeling isolated. How would I do this? It was much more of a liminal experience. And so all that, I think companies are realizing, okay, we can definitely get some benefits out of that. And so some of those benefits that the survey reflects, speed to market is a key thing right now for companies struggling to figure out a new way of working, heck, maybe even a new way of doing business in a remote world. So 60% of folks said that Agile has helped improve that speed to market. So again, that's like, well, pretty good luck there if you're gonna try to do that. Let's start getting serious about Agile. 41% said they're better able to manage distributed teams with good Agile practices in place, which again makes a lot of sense. And when I'm using Agile, I'm using it as like the whole ecosystem. So from the thoughts and things like that get filtered down to stories into your whole DevSecOps into production. And so if you think through, a lot of that's happening in the cloud, there's automation built around it. It certainly is going to help with distributed teams. And then 58% would say they've increased team productivity. And a lot of that has the companies that have been mature in their Agile adoption have increased productivity in the midst of the pandemic, because now leaders are finally getting involved. They're kind of taking away some of those barriers. And so companies that have not been in that are kind of the other end of the curve, where they're swimming, trying to figure out how to keep their head above water. So definitely one of those things where I think the winners in this are people who have been listening to that all along, trying to figure out the best way to be competitive in a pre-pandemic environment. And it's those same principles that are going to make you competitive through the pandemic and a post-pandemic environment. So really, really getting serious about that.
Wow. Interesting findings. And I'm sure there's lots more information in the report that we didn't even talk about. So if folks are interested in getting a copy of the report, they just go to digital.ai and find it there on the website?
Yeah, and it's stateofagilereport.com also is the place you can go get that. So it's, again, it's a great tool. I've used this thing for years as an Agile coach and transformation leader. And it's one of those things where you can go through and kind of bolster what it is you're trying to show with real numbers that are international and across a variety of different companies there. So great tool to kind of extend your transformation and help your organization figure out how to be more profitable and better meet customer needs.
Awesome. Well, Danny, thanks so much for taking the time, walking me through it a little bit and having the discussion with me. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, guys, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Thanks, Charlene. That was a great interview. And thanks to Danny Preston and all our friends at Digital AI. We're watching, how this new company continues to make their presence felt in the market. Now we're going to head over to the analyst corner with Mitch, where Mitchell actually has some great information for us.
Well, what a week last week was with TechStrongcon. I hope you were able to join and take advantage of it. I can't remember the numbers. It's something like 50 different videos of content of people. I mean, I don't know where you get that kind of information. Matter of fact, it's not just information, it's body of knowledge. I mean, you had John Willis and Emmett Keefe and Rosalind Radcliffe and Helen Beale, and you can Sanjeev Sharma. You can name after name. And while not everyone in the universe of DevOps and cloud and cybersecurity were there, but a lot of people were. Certainly, who I follow. I heard both Alan and John Willis talking, Alan Schimel, John Willis talking about these are the kind of people that I sit in the audience and I sit up front and I take notes when they talk, and I did. I couldn't watch videos nonstop, but I've got that as a resource. So I can't say enough about some of the information that was shared and the resources that are there. So please take advantage of it. It's free. It costs nothing. Sign up. You're going to get access to all the content that was there. There's all the chat that was part of those conversations are still there as well. Think about what a quality and valuable source that is for us in our industry, us in our careers, in our jobs, in the jobs that we're doing. Matter of fact, what I want to talk about today, in addition to recapping that, is just kind of contrasting, presenting really a challenge, a question that I have around social media. I'm really questioning the value of it right now because so much of it, well, let me back up for a minute. Let's talk about it this way. I think things like TechStrongCon, DevOps.com, sites like that are people who who the organization who's putting that content out there. Those speakers and the reputations that they've developed. If they're phonies, if they're legit. And so that's how you assess whether something's a valuable resource and how much stock to put in that information. I've heard people say, well, this analyst think that. And so, I don't agree with them on that, but I do like these things. You're not going to agree with everything that one person says or even that a company says, whether they're a media outlet, an analyst firm, whatever, a speaker, an expert in an area. But you do have a sense of value and validity that you put on those. I'm really struggling about that with social media right now. There was an article in ZDNet that said in January, they used a group of Carnegie Mellon students, researchers, where they collected 20 million tweets around the subject of coronavirus. And an unimaginable 82% of the top 50 influential retweeters, if I could say that right, influential retweeters are bots based on that study. Now they're talking about 200 million tweets around coronavirus. So this isn't the 1,000 tweets that they looked at. This is massive numbers. In addition, more than 60% of the top 1,000 retweeters are bots. So how is that a good source of information? Now, I post our company's posts on social media, and Twitter is one of them. Our president uses it for who knows what. I mean, a lot of things get published on that. I think many of us believe are just nonsense and don't make sense, and so I don't pay attention to it, frankly. So social media, I mean, I think there's an argument to be said around Facebook. And there's, in the political realm, there was controversy about why Facebook, Zuckerberg has not elected to make any or comment or remove inaccurate statements by politicians, president, et cetera, et cetera. And at the same hand, Twitter is now attaching some editorial content, if you will, that this could be inciting violence or this may not be true. Here's a resource. And that's helpful. But I just wonder, were we living in an automated age where those aren't people behind many of those things that are being created? If they're bots, obviously. And if they're bots, what are they doing? They are promoting some agenda of the owners or perpetrators or populators of those bots, and they're doing that for a reason. You could say it's political. You could say it's financially motivated. Someone is influencing the audience. And yeah, you can argue, different channels have different political bents. TV shows and movies have messages that they're carrying off. It was pretty easy to look at who the director is and who the sponsors are. you can kind of dig into the bias, or at least the position of whether you think people are taking and why they're taking that. You know, why are they promoting that view? I'm struggling to do that with social media, with Twitter in particular, but also Facebook. And I keep debating back and forth. Do I want to continue to do this? I mean, I connect with people on it, more so Facebook, but still not that much. And all the other stuff, I just hesitate to know whether it's even valid. So unless it's from a media resource or a speaker that I know, and that I think has, you know, got some reasonable credibility, and all this other stuff, I see sites posted, who the heck has heard of that site? Or that group, you know, maybe they are legit, but I certainly don't know. So I think we are entering, if we're not already there, an age of social media discontent, where it's strictly a way to amplify a message into its own echo chamber, and that's it. And that's all it's really for. That's all it's accomplishing. So all the tweets we're sending, are those really influencing people? Maybe it is, but it's not doing it in many cases from a good standpoint, for a good cause. Same thing for Facebook. If these things are automated, 82% of the top influential retweeters are bots. Okay, they're taking other people's content, maybe legitimate content, but I bet it's probably things that aren't legit, and that's what's getting retweeted. So I question, why do we have social media if that's what its value is? I question Twitter, Facebook, and others. What's the value of your platform if anybody can just spew whatever and you can't tell what's real or not? It's like sort of having the fake videos, right, that have been doctored up. If you can't tell if it's legit, you're going to start to not trust it. I'm not trusting it. At least I'm not feeling the love for it right now. So I'd be interested in your perspective on this. And I'm usually not a cynical person about things, but when I start to lose faith in something, or at least certainly lose the trust that I have in, you know, a source or a platform, or I just question what's happening. It's not just this one study coming out of Carnegie Mellon. That's just the latest thing, and all things that are happening and the abuses and misuse of social media. So maybe we need to return to more of a golden age of social media where that was much less so. And they really were platforms for connecting with people, because they aren't right now. I don't see them as platforms for people. Like they're platforms for bots to communicate what they have to say, whatever the people behind it want us to know. So anyway, I'm not into conspiracy theories. I'm not a negative person about technology and things like that. But I do think we've crossed the Rubicon, if you will, with social media, and we're seeing the downfall of it. I think it's probably all downhill from here unless somebody pulls back on the stick and really refocuses on why we have these platforms, why people should trust them, because I think people are losing the trust. So I've taken a real editorial stance today. I don't typically wax on some social issue, but of course a lot of that, a lot of social issues are top of mind for us, and whether it's Black Lives Matter and police brutality, and I have to be honest with you, those things disturb me greatly. It also disturbs me when we're complacent or complicit by our complacency. So I don't necessarily want to delve into that whole topic at the moment, not because it isn't important, but I don't think it can be treated properly in a few minutes on a video. I would point you to Andrew Schaefer's talk at TechStrongcon. He was one of the keynote speakers. And Andrew put it on the line. He talked about his privilege as a white person. He talked about the things happening in society that he's no longer comfortable sitting back and being silent about. And so he's talking about it, and I applaud him for doing that, and I admire him for doing that. It's inspired me to think more about that. And I'm having conversations with coworkers about sources to learn about what's happening. Like there's a great documentary on Netflix called 13th. That's about the 13th Amendment and how that's influenced sort of the criminalization of people and things that happen in our society. So here's my message around that, and because this also ties back to the improper or misuse of social media. I think the best thing we can do is figure out how to become an ally. That's a great phrase that I've learned from my kids, actually, talking about sexual identity, non-binary sexual identity, things like that, and seeking to understand. I think we've done a tremendous lot of good in the area of in women in the workplace and women's the whole awoke thing. And again, I'm a little uncomfortable with the right language to use, but really taking more seriously of making sure that we have the right kind of society where people are valued for lots of things, not because they conform to the existing, but we really embrace people. And I think that's what this is about, around the whole Black Lives Matter and police brutality. So wherever you fall on that spectrum, I hope that while it may be a real challenge to address and really face our own biases, it's certainly much easier to step into the conversation with a willingness to learn. And maybe from that learning, we will find some things to challenge. But we won't learn if we only look at the sources that tell us what we already believe. I know I don't get challenged by that. So as we face these kinds of things, and I address this here because, frankly, it's part of our work world. It's not just something that's happening on TV in cities at night. It's the work world that we live in. There are groups that are promoting Black people in tech. And how do we help become an ally for that, just like we are for women in the workplace? And we've done and made good progress, or at least some progress in those fronts too. So my thought is to share with you on that is, let's keep a open mind of learning. It doesn't mean we're wrong. Doesn't mean we're bad people. If we see something about ourselves we might want to rethink, that's okay too. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But I think that's the least we can do to help ourselves and help ourselves create a better society in the world that we live. So I appreciate if you've hung with me to the end here, thinking some of these things through. And that's part of what I'm doing is learning and processing and trying to be the best person and best leader that I can be in the world that we're in, and embrace and value and love all people and help them succeed, not just ourselves. So I hope you are on a journey of learning and exploration, as well as maybe challenging things like social media and asking, why are we doing what we're doing? So have a good day, and thank you for listening.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hello, welcome to the 4th tutorial in the Engineering DevOps tutorial series. This tutorial is entitled Engineering People, Process, and Technology for DevOps. I am Mark Hornbeek, DevOps the Gray, CEO and Principal Consultant of Engineering DevOps Consulting, analyst of the Accelerated Strategies Group, ambassador and course author for the DevOps Institute, a blogger on DevOps.com, and author of the book Engineering DevOps. My website is www.engineeringdevops.com. Let's get started. Here's the agenda. Okay, so DevOps is engineering. Why is that relevant? I'll be talking about that in a moment. I'll be presenting a maturity model for engineering DevOps that is described in the context of people, process, and technology attributes. I'll be talking about 27 critical success factors for DevOps, which help you to orchestrate a DevOps solution, and how to arrange people, process, and technology factors for your solution, and a summary. If you want to learn more, there is a white paper of this topic on my website, and I'll give you a link for that at the end of this talk. Okay, so DevOps is engineering. Why does that matter? Well, engineering is more than just a word. There is a concept of a disciplined mindset, a disciplined approach. So in my mind, and this may be controversial to some people that are computer scientists, if you like, or other, I believe DevOps itself belongs to the category of software engineering more than computer science. That doesn't mean that computer scientists can't do DevOps, of course. I'm just saying that as a discipline, I think it really belongs in the category of software engineering, and the ideas of software engineering are used to really build a well-engineered DevOps system. So computer science is really more of an art form. It does fit in the creation of software and creation of innovative software products, whereas DevOps more has to do with the disciplined engineering methodologies for designing, as well as development, and in particular the production of software. So I believe engineering methodologies apply to the, if you like, the pipeline and the mechanics and all of the things that make up DevOps to support software. So basically, a well-engineered DevOps facilitates a creative software design process because it reduces production bottlenecks from the software creator. The Software Engineering Institute some time ago created something called the Capability and Maturity Model. It has 5 levels of maturity. It's a convenient way of categorizing maturity, and I do use this as a way to categorize maturity levels for DevOps, as you'll see in the next slide. So the starting point is called initial, where you really have not a stable environment for developing and delivering software. The next level is called repeatable, where you have a basic level of software management controls. So things such as software configuration management, software quality assurance is in place to some degree. Defined indicates that there's a standard process across the entire organization. So examples of capabilities that relate to this are peer reviews, intergroup coordination activities, product engineering activities. Managed at level 4, you have quality and processes being much more measured and analyzed quantitatively, quality management practices in place, process measurement and analysis are part of the culture. And finally, optimizing, which is a never forever level, if you like, because you're constantly optimizing, practicing continuous process improvements, process change management, and innovation of the technology for the product as well as the processes. So how does that apply to DevOps? I think that you could retitle the initial level to chaos, if you like. I like to do that. I think it describes it a little better. It's really a lack of stable, having a stable environment for developing and maintaining software. Some example practices that are visible in this situation, you have team silos, very little cross-team communication going on. The next level I call continuous integration, where the front end of the pipeline has some solid engineering practices. So you have builds and tests and production release artifacts being version managed, and the process is being repeatable, at least at the front end. And then continuous flow, which is the first way of DevOps. You have a standard end-to-end process. Examples are orchestrated and automated pipelines for developing, but in particular also delivering software. And you have release acceptance metrics and analysis in place. Level 4, I call continuous feedback, which is the second way of DevOps. People, process, and technology dimensions are measured and analyzed quantitatively, and the analytics drive such actions as automated deployments and automated rollbacks. Continuous improvement, the 5th level, you have a culture of continuous experimentation and improvement. There are risks and costs continuously optimized and analyzed. So basically, this is how I overlay a maturity levels for DevOps, engineering DevOps on top of the Software Engineering Institute capability maturity model. So the maturity model for engineering DevOps, you can actually create a chart where you have on the left side the different maturity levels I just mentioned, and on the columns on the right, what are characteristics typical characteristics of people, process, and technology aspects that are consistent with the different maturity levels. So this engineering DevOps maturity model illustrates how people, process, and technologies can be balanced for each maturity level to realize a well-balanced solution suitable for the level of maturity that best fits your organization and your applications. The idea is that there's not a whole lot of point in having, if you like, level 5, let's say, monitoring practices. If you're really down at level 2 of maturity overall, you're probably overspending on monitoring and not doing enough on some of the other things to have a well-balanced solution. So that's kind of the idea of this matrix. This is not a standard, of course. This is my own creation. Actually, I've seen others that use something similar. It's probably most important that you decide for your own organization what to use, or you can use mine if you like. So the next few charts, I'll go into details for each of the people, process, and technology levels. Okay, so what's the maturity level for engineering DevOps with people? When I say people, I mean leadership, the organization, the teams, the culture, all of the people aspects that are relevant for DevOps. At the chaos level, what you observe typically is an overdependence on individuals and experts focused on individual department goals rather than bigger picture, broader product goals or organization goals. And at the continuous integration level, you have communication going on between the different silos. There's cross-functional participation. Backlogs are systematically managed together. Continuous flow, leadership tends to advocate and sponsor DevOps. Cross-functional team collaboration exists, and usually there are DevOps training programs in place. At the continuous feedback level, you have self-directed cultures using shared metrics with a focus on removing bottlenecks. You have advanced training, and you have mentors and guilds and more ways for people to advance their DevOps skills. Finally, at the continuous improvement level, there's continuous experimentation and improvement. There's a confidence in the organization in its ability to deliver products quickly and without risk because they have mastered the prior levels. The training programs tend to emphasize mastery and proactive participation in industry events and outreach in order to look for innovative ways to innovate and improve. So maturity levels for engineering DevOps in the process column. When I say process, I'm talking about the value streams and workflows that make up the activities that, whether they're automated or manual, for DevOps. At the chaos level, processes tend to be very poorly defined, tend to be operated manually. They're relatively unpredictable and tend to be reactive in nature rather than proactive. At the continuous integration level, workflows are defined within the silos. There typically are no standards for end-to-end processes, but there can be a lot of human intervention, but at least within the integration level in the front end of the process, there tends to be a fair amount of standardization and well understood practices that are followed by the organization. At level 3, continuous flow, value streams from end to end are defined, and processes that make up the end-to-end continuous delivery pipeline tend to be automated, at least quite a lot automated, maybe not 100%. Excuse me. At level 4, continuous feedback, performance indicators are visible and used proactively to manage processes for applications as well as pipelines, as well as infrastructure elements. So there's a lot of feedback activity built into the pipeline and the value stream. Finally, at continuous improvement level, there's a lot of self-service automation available to developers. It's kind of DevOps as a service, if you like. There's risk and cost optimizations being measured proactively, and there's a high degree of experimentation with process to improve performance of the pipeline and the value stream. Okay, so the final column, technology, which I'm talking about not only the tools and pipelines, but also the products. In general, at the chaos level, there's a lack of tools, or at least inconsistent tools, for certain parts of the pipeline or tool chain or value stream. And there's a lack of concrete automation results, a lot of variance in the results because of that. Within continuous integration level, level 2, The application source code is version managed consistently. The builds and build artifacts tests are largely automated, but the release and deployment are typically fairly manual and quite error prone at the release end. The continuous flow level 3, the tool chain orchestrates and automates builds, tests, as well as deliveries and the infrastructure. So you have an automated release acceptance and deployment pipeline. At continuous feedback level, you build upon continuous flow. You have applications, pipelines, and infrastructure components fully instrumented with metrics and analytics to drive deployments and rollbacks where needed to roll back to a prior version if there's a problem. At the final level, continuous improvement, deployments are using zero downtime methods and immutable cluster deployment tools such as Kubernetes. The resiliency of pipelines and infrastructures are actively tested for forcing failures and enforcing resiliency by using policies and automation and a lot of checking. So you're constantly experimenting with not only the product, but the pipeline and tools and infrastructure. So those are the model for engineering DevOps according to people, process, and technology. How can you use these to achieve a well-balanced solution? It's not easy. I certainly would admit that. 27 critical success factors, if you think about it, right? There are 9 pillars of DevOps that we covered in a prior tutorial. The 9 pillars, again, were leadership, collaborative culture, design for DevOps, continuous integration, continuous testing, elastic infrastructures, continuous monitoring, continuous security, and continuous delivery. Each of those have 3 dimensions: people, process, and technology aspects. And really, you want to, just make choices for each of those things. The cross product of 9 times 3 is 27. 27 critical success factors. This isn't a random, process. You want to have a well-balanced solution. So if you're trying to have a well-balanced, let's say continuous flow, then you want to really be careful about what your choices are for each of those 9 pillars and 3 dimensions so that you have a well-balanced solution that fits a continuous flow solution. On the other hand, if you're trying to get to continuous feedback, again, you want to slowly build up what is necessary to have all of the elements that are suitable for that level of maturity, ultimately getting into continuous improvement. So bottom line is a well-engineered DevOps system is designed carefully to strike an optimum balance between the different factors to accomplish the goals of your project. Okay, so the final slide, basically, how do you engineer people, process, and technologies for DevOps? That was the original question that this tutorial intended to answer. So the answer is, as you can tell from the discussion, the engineering DevOps model, defined in terms of people, process, technology, provides a useful guide for engineering DevOps. And successful implementations of DevOps are engineered by balancing the 27 critical success factors to suit the maturity level of an organization. The 27 factors are a cross product of the 9 pillars of DevOps and the 3 dimensions: people, process, and technology. The 5 DevOps maturity levels are chaos, continuous integration, continuous flow, continuous feedback, and continuous improvement. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Hope you look forward to the next one. If you would like to learn more, you're welcome to contact me at mhornbeek@engineeringdevops.com or look up the white paper. It's free for download on my website, engineeringdevops.com/documents, or get a copy of my book at mybook.to/engineeringdevops. Thank you for listening. Hope to see you in the next tutorial soon. Thank you.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey everyone, back here in our TechStrong TV studios. Thanks to Mitchell Ashley. Of course, thanks to Charlene O'Hanlon. Thanks to all our guests for appearing today. We hope you've enjoyed today's show for Monday, June 8th. We will be back here tomorrow for Tuesday the 9th, and then back again on Thursday. So please keep tuning in. Please tell your friends about the show. And until tomorrow, stay safe, stay well. Stay strong. Tech strong.